Just moments ago, Buckingham Palace shattered the illusion of calm with a joint statement from King Charles and Prince William, revealing a heartbreaking truth that no one was prepared for. What started as a guarded silence has now turned into a national heartbreak, with Princess Catherine at the very center. But behind the royal curtains, a more intimate tragedy unfolded, one involving a child's innocent cry that echoed louder than any headline. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began with an unprecedented sight: Charles and William standing side by side, both visibly shaken, stepping into the public eye not as monarch and heir, but as family members carrying the unbearable weight of sorrow. The carefully chosen words in their statement left little room for misinterpretation. Princess Catherine's condition had taken a tragic and unexpected turn. Though the announcement was brief, its impact was instant. The nation, already teetering on the edge of speculation, was plunged into a state of collective mourning. But it wasn't the media frenzy or the candlelit vigils outside Windsor that truly captured the gravity of the moment. It was what happened inside Adelaide Cottage, the intimate space where royal status fades and family remains, that revealed the true cost of this revelation. In the quiet of the nursery, Prince Louis, too young to grasp the full extent of the words spoken, overheard fragments of conversation. His small voice, trembling and confused, pierced the silence with a simple, devastating question. "Where's Mummy?" And when no one could answer him, his tears flowed without restraint. A young boy, stripped of the comfort of certainty, cried out for the one person who had always made the world feel safe. That single moment, raw, human, and unfiltered, sent shockwaves through the household, leaving even the palace staff in stunned silence. It was no longer just a public health update or a shift in royal protocol. It was a family unraveling. And while the cameras captured the stoicism of kings and princes, they missed the emotional epicenter of the tragedy, a child's heartbreak that no title or tradition could contain. Behind the grandeur and the gold-trimmed press releases, something far more fragile was unfolding. And that fragility, felt in the sobs of a little boy, tore through every layer of royal insulation. But to truly understand how we reached this breaking point, we must go back before the tears, before the silence, to the moment the palace knew something was deeply wrong. Before the world heard the devastating news, the silence had already begun to speak volumes. As weeks turned into months with no public sightings of Princess Kate, whispers of concern morphed into a growing sense of dread. Something wasn't right, and the palace's carefully curated calm couldn't mask the storm building behind closed doors. What began as a simple announcement of routine surgery quickly unraveled into a void of unanswered questions. Because while Kensington Palace assured everyone that Catherine was recovering comfortably, the absence that followed contradicted every word. Days passed, then weeks, and the woman known for her unwavering presence in public life simply vanished. No charity engagements, no school runs, no brief walkabouts, no photographs leaving Windsor, not even a carefully staged image released to calm the public's nerves. Instead, there was silence, thick, heavy, and unnatural, stretching into a timeline that no longer felt like healing, but hiding. It didn't take long for people to notice. Royal watchers, who could read palace rhythms better than their own heartbeat, sensed something more sinister beneath the surface. Catherine wasn't just recovering. She was missing, and the longer she stayed out of sight, the faster speculation grew. But the real alarm bells began ringing when Prince William, usually unshakable in his duties, started withdrawing too. One by one, his engagements disappeared from the royal calendar. A charity gala cancelled. A diplomatic dinner postponed. A school visit abandoned with no explanation. William's polished composure began to crack, his smiles growing tighter, his appearances shorter, until finally, his public presence tapered into a faint echo of itself. For a future king known to thrive under pressure, this sudden retreat was more telling than any statement the palace refused to offer. Inside Kensington Palace, communications advisors scrambled to maintain the illusion of control. issuing brief, vague remarks about privacy and rest, hoping the world would accept the silence as kindness. But it only fueled more doubt. The public wasn't reassured, they were unsettled. And with every non-answer, every empty update, every carefully avoided detail, the suspicion grew that something much darker was unfolding behind the palace gates. By this point, the press had sharpened their focus. Global news outlets sent reporters to hospitals associated with the royal family. Paparazzi camped outside Windsor with lenses powerful enough to read the stitching on a curtain. Yet not a single image of Catherine emerged, not one shadow behind a window, not one silhouette being escorted into a car. The world's most photographed woman had vanished in a way that defied reality. Even the most persistent photographers, the ones who had trailed her for more than a decade, admitted defeat. And that's when the narrative shifted. Because when a royal disappears, history has taught the public to expect the worst. The whispers grew louder. What are they hiding? Became the question on every front page. Rumors spiraled, some outlandish, others disturbingly plausible, but all pointing to the same unsettling truth. The palace was keeping something back, something big, something fragile. Even within royal circles, anxiety spread as staff members noticed changes in William's posture, his voice, his eyes. They saw the tension. They heard the hurried footsteps, the hushed conversations, the late-night meetings behind closed doors, and though no one dared say it aloud, everyone felt the same icy uncertainty settling across the royal estate. A storm was forming, and the silence wasn't protecting Catherine anymore, it was burying her. But behind the blackout, a silent war was being waged, and it was Catherine's body that was under siege. While the public was told to stay calm, the truth was being locked away behind guarded doors. Catherine's medical team had discovered something months earlier, a diagnosis so sensitive, even senior royals hesitated to speak it aloud. What followed was a dangerous gamble with time, optics, and a woman's life. It all began in late 2023, when Catherine underwent a series of routine health screenings meant to confirm recovery, not uncover catastrophe. But buried within her blood work were subtle anomalies, markers that hinted at something deeper, something silent yet aggressive. At first, doctors flagged them as inconclusive, advising continued observation, yet within weeks, those early warnings sharpened into a more chilling reality. But the palace, ever concerned with appearances, quickly stepped in, not to prepare the public, but to manage perception. Discussions weren't about treatment plans, they were about timing, headlines, and narrative control. The focus wasn't Catherine's health. It was the crown's stability. Inside the palace walls, a bitter divide formed. William, already consumed with worry, pushed for honesty, pleading with advisors to tell the truth before speculation exploded. But he was met with deflection. Senior aides argued that revealing anything now on top of Charles's own health crisis would trigger a national crisis of confidence. Two key royals unwell at once? The press would feast on it. The public would panic. The monarchy could appear weak. And so, in hushed meetings and coded emails, the decision was made. Delay the truth, downplay the findings, manage the story until it's absolutely necessary to reveal more. The word cancer wasn't forbidden, but it was buried beneath layers of euphemism and half-truths. Catherine, ever the loyal consort, initially complied. She believed it would pass. That early intervention, paired with rest, could stop the spread. But her body had other plans. The toll was immediate. Her energy collapsed. Her appetite disappeared. Her sparkle, the thing the world had always admired, began to flicker. And then came the first incident. At a private charity function, surrounded by donors and dignitaries, Catherine collapsed without warning. Palace officials acted fast, spiriting her away before the press caught wind. The explanation? A migraine, a late night, dehydration. But inside the walls of Kensington Palace, fear was thick in the air. A second collapse occurred just days later, this time
During a visit to a children's hospice, she was whisked away, her condition carefully masked by tightly controlled statements, and her voice silenced in favor of strategic optics. Doctors grew increasingly urgent, warning that the cancer was advancing faster than expected, and every day without treatment heightened the risk. Each decision to delay, to conceal the truth, or to stage a smile for the cameras became a dagger to the woman at the center of it all, and William knew it. He watched his wife fade while those around him clung to the illusion of control, realizing that the monarchy was gambling with something far more sacred than public image, Catherine's life. The illness was devastating, but it was the palace's insistence on secrecy that pushed him over the edge. In the long nights at Adelaide Cottage, Prince William was not a future king. He was a terrified husband, torn between composure and the fear of losing the love of his life. As the institution he served refused to act, he retreated from the world he once navigated with precision, disappearing into the private gardens, ignoring meetings, and shielding the fraying edges of his life from completely unraveling. Every smile became a performance, every engagement a heavy burden, and inside their home, quiet elegance gave way to emotional crisis. Their children noticed first, hesitant questions, silent glances, and Louis's repeated, "Where's Mommy?" exposed the depth of the family's fracture. William, usually so adept with his children, was frozen, not for lack of knowledge, but because speaking the truth aloud felt like giving it power. His strength shattered under the weight of holding the institution together while his wife slipped away, and his frustration with the palace's inaction reached its breaking point. Repeated pleas to senior advisors to acknowledge Catherine's humanity were met with polished resistance. Words like containment, strategy, and optics thrown back, as if she were a brand, not a person. One sleepless night, he sent a brief but defiant email directly to King Charles. "She deserves more than silence," a raw and deeply human cry for compassion. Charles, shaken, was forced to confront a painful choice between duty and a crumbling family. Then, in an unprecedented move, Catherine herself took control, shattering royal protocol. Sitting in the quiet of her garden, she recorded a short message, her voice soft yet steady, acknowledging publicly that she was actively battling cancer and that chemotherapy had begun. She thanked the public for their support and asked for space for her family to face this journey, speaking not as a royal, but as a mother preparing her children for an uncertain future. Her message, unfiltered and deeply vulnerable, spread instantly, dominating global news and capturing the hearts of millions. The moment Catherine's video reached the public, it flooded every platform, sparking vigils within hours as citizens gathered at Windsor, Kensington, and even Balmoral to hold candles, whisper prayers, and feel close to a woman now seen not just as a princess, but as one of them. Inside the palace, it was Prince Louis who felt the revelation most acutely, too young to fully understand, yet old enough to recognize his mother's pain. Watching her with wide eyes and trembling lips, he repeatedly asked, "Is Mommy going to die?" slicing through William like a blade. For the first time, the future king had no words, not because he didn't know the truth, but because speaking it aloud felt like giving it power. Catherine's message struck the world, but devastated the family, shattering the monarchy's carefully maintained illusion that control could insulate them from pain. What the institution had tried to suppress was now public, permanent, and piercing. While millions lit candles in solidarity, inside the palace her children's tears ignited a storm of tension. Rival agendas emerged. With Charles's health fragile and Catherine absent, Queen Camilla quietly signalled her willingness to take on more visible ceremonial roles, while Princess Anne-Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, pushed back fiercely, insisting that any attempt to replace Catherine would appear cold, calculated, and unforgivable. The palace split between those prioritizing public image and those demanding dignity over duty, while William refused to entertain contingency plans, insisting his wife was still fighting and no one would move forward without her. At the same time, the children's emotional state became urgent. Louis clung to William, refusing to sleep alone, while George and Charlotte mirrored the household anxiety. Catherine, sensing the fracture, began secretly writing handwritten letters to each child, to be opened only in the worst-case scenario, a mother preparing for absence in a home built around her presence. King Charles, torn between duty and love, watched his son and grandchildren struggle, realizing that his reign had never demanded leadership through such heartbreak. Meetings continued, press strategies were refined, but none could erase the family's precarious state, and Catherine remained fighting in silence. Then, hope arrived not from the palace, but from her. In a second, raw video, Catherine shared that the cancer was in remission, not as a polished royal statement, but as a simple, powerful message from survival itself. Her words were filled with gratitude, grounded hope, and acknowledgement of the strength drawn from her children, from William, and from the support of a nation. Inside Adelaide Cottage, emotions exploded. William finally allowed himself to exhale, breaking down in relief, holding George and Charlotte as they wept, while Louis clung to his mother with the fierce grip of a child who had been given back the one person he could not live without. It was a moment of joy, tempered by the knowledge that the remission, while real, remained fragile, and the path ahead uncertain. When Catherine's first video revealing her cancer diagnosis went public, the world flooded with grief and solidarity. Vigils sprang up within hours at Windsor, Kensington, and Balmoral, as citizens held candles, whispered prayers, and felt close to a woman now seen not just as a princess, but as one of them. Inside the palace, however, it was Prince Louis who felt the revelation most acutely. Too young to fully understand, yet old enough to recognize his mother's pain, he watched with wide eyes, trembling lips, repeatedly asking, "Is Mommy going to die?" William, usually composed, had no answer. The monarchy's illusion of control, its ability to shield the family from pain, was shattered. What had been private, hidden behind ceremonial facades and curated appearances, was now public and piercing. As millions mourned, the palace fractured. Rival agendas emerged. Queen Camilla quietly signaled willingness to assume ceremonial roles, while Princess Anne and Sophie insisted Catherine's space to heal be preserved. William refused to consider any replacement, insisting his wife was still fighting. The children's distress became urgent. Louis clung to William, George and Charlotte. Mirrored household anxiety, and Catherine, aware of the emotional fracture, secretly wrote letters to her children to be opened only if the worst occurred. Charles, torn between duty and love, realized leadership now demanded navigating heartbreak. Amid palace machinery and press strategy, Catherine fought in silence. Then hope arrived. A second raw video announced her cancer was in remission. Not polished, not ceremonial, just survival, gratitude, and grounded hope. Inside Adelaide Cottage, William finally exhaled. George and Charlotte wept in his arms, and Louis clung to Catherine with a grip born of fear transformed into relief. The remission was fragile, but the emotional liberation was profound. Catherine did not promise a return to normal, nor immediate resumption of royal duties. Headlines celebrated, crowds cheered, and social media surged with gratitude. Yet the palace remained measured. No rushed appearances, no sudden pageantry. The royal household began quietly restructuring. Emotional transparency replaced euphemisms. Honesty, even painful, became a guiding principle. Charles and William revised roles and responsibilities, prioritizing empathy over rigidity, and creating unprecedented contingency plans for illness, mental health, and family crises. Catherine's initiatives, particularly those focused on childhood development, gained new prominence. Her public speeches carried the authenticity of someone who had endured personal storms, elevating compassion from soft work to the soul of the institution. At home, Louis's attachment deepened, his hand never far from his mother's, shaping her daily schedule. George and Charlotte mirrored his vigilance, while William embraced the emotional truth he had long shielded. In private, he declared, "Her recovery is the real strength of the crown," signaling a seismic cultural shift. For the public, the royals now felt less like distant authority figures, and more like a family confronting universal fears, love, and fragility. Catherine had given them permission to be human, and that humanity revitalized the monarchy. Louis's simple, raw tears, his unfiltered fear and love, became a defining symbol of this new era. His emotional honesty sparked palace-wide reforms. Children's mental health gained priority. The compassion protocol was introduced for crisis response, and the palace adopted a model allowing grief, pause, and vulnerability. Catherine's private letters became emblems of foresight and maternal devotion. The monarchy's public image slowly transformed, with approval ratings rising not from spectacle, but authenticity. As Catherine recovered, her bond with Louis deepened. He became her shadow, guardian, and echo, a living reminder of the emotional heart of the family. The nation no longer asked merely who would wear the crown, it asked who would carry its heart. The answer, reflected in a mother and her child, revealed a new vision of royalty, defined not by thrones or titles, but by love, resilience, and the courage to be human.